understanding the deduction. Prior to 2017, $6,000 of whatever you earned in that year, you could set aside, and the government would not tax you on that $6,000 as an individual. Before I got to Congress in 2017, they did a temporary, not long-term, temporary change to the standard deduction, and they increased that from $6,000 to $12,000. Am I remembering, is that correct? 6 to 12.
Very correct.
Jack works for me in D.C., so he's the guy to make sure that if I say something that's incorrect, as we've worked on this information in budget committee and otherwise, he's here to correct me, right? But if you can see me saying numbers that are incorrect, you feel free to correct me. As long as it's civilly done. The one big beautiful bill, instead of it being now $12,000, we changed it to permanence. Okay, so it's not going to be temporary, but it's now $15,000 per individual. So I want you to keep, because that's going to come back in this presentation. Standard deduction utilized by 90% of all taxpayers right now is $15,000. You can set it aside and you are not taxed on it. That's going to come to play when we talk about lower income individuals and what the tax change is going to be for them. So just keep this in mind. Standard deduction used by 90%. Most people don't want to itemize. 90% of those people that utilize that would have seen their standard deduction go back to $6,000 instead of now $15,000. 26 million number of small businesses be hit with an increase in their top marginal rate. When I started my Dirtworks business, little dozer excavator trucking business, I put an LLC together because if we hadn't called Okie One, is it Okie One? If I remember correctly, anybody in the construction business? Okie One? Anybody in construction? Okay. Whatever it is, I'd call Okie to do line identification. So the excavator or the dozer would dig up electricity or natural gas. I had a general liability policy. But if something was to happen, my general liability policy up to certain max amounts, I didn't want my home taken. It's one thing for them to take your business, it's another thing for them to take your home. So many people, I can only speak from the construction world, put an LLC together because of the protection. If you get in the worst case scenario and you lose the business, you don't lose your home. Okay? What don't confuse though, an LLC, sole proprietorship, a lot of things, you're taxed at your top marginal income bracket. So whatever your income tax structure is, the LLC you'll still have that in your LLC. So make sure everybody understands that. The LLC is a legal structure, but it's a pass-through of whatever you're paying in your individual income tax rate, you'll pay that in your LLC. Okay, but when we talk about the number of people that have been hit with the top, because you have people that make on the graduated tax brackets up to 37%, plus some other tax provisions, that's where the addition of the 37 plus the 43 came from. All right. And y'all, if any of this is sloppy and you need more clarification, just wait. Page 26, 27, 28, we go much granular, which we never get to in these presentations before we've already done it. But if you want more detail, we put it 26, 27, 28. Okay. 88% of seniors will pay no income tax on their Social Security moving forward because of the one big beautiful bill. The standard deduction used by 90% sets aside $15,000 of income, the average person, and what they get on their Social Security. That is all that combined together as to the rationale as to you can make the statement 88% of seniors will not pay a dime on their Social Security. We didn't change anything on Social Security because we were strictly prohibited by law under reconciliation from being able to do anything to Social Security. Okay? But the effect of the tax changes is why 88%. So when you hear people say, well, how it relates to Social Security, it's usually standard deduction. I'm overgeneralizing it, but the bulk of it is because of the standard deduction. The $15,000 makes it where 88% will not pay for their Social Security. Jack, anything I said there incorrect? Okay. Again, we added an additional $1,500 in the bill, moving the standard deduction up. Families, the child tax credit. All right, got one taker at least for a child that is going to be claimed on taxes. Children, how many of you in the room have children? Okay, all right. So Julie, that child, right? Depending on the age and how they fall in. That child, prior to 2017, per child, it was $1,000 per child that you were able to do a tax credit, not a not a tax deduction based upon. What's the difference between a deduction and a credit? For general understanding, a deduction is you can set that valuation aside, $15,000 is the standard deduction, set it aside whatever you made that year, and you're not going to be taxed on that first $15,000. Everything else. A credit is after you've tabulated what you owe the government, and let's say you have a tax bill for $2,200. Okay? Now, let's say the federal government says you owe $2,200. Let's say you have one child in your house. The child tax credit in 2017 was $1,000. Now, post one big beautiful bill, it's now $2,200. So if the federal government says you owe $2,200 as your tax liability, and you have one child you claim just by the child tax credit, what's your tax liability now? Zero. So we increased permanently. You can find this on page 26, 27. It is permanent now. 26, 27, 28. We increased permanently that deduction for that child. $2,200. Adoption tax credit is now $5,000. Is that permanence, Jack? Can we get 5,000 permanence on the adoption tax credit? Get back to me on that. The accounts for newborns. Some of y'all know that within 8-9 years insolvency relative to Social Security and Medicare because of the payroll tax not keeping up with Social Security and Medicare. This is a 3-year time period for this investment account, $1,000, that has that in mind as a part of the rationale. How many of you have concerns that your children will inherit a lesser standard of living, that you're concerned over what Social Security may look like for them? Okay? So this $1,000 account is a potential way. It's only for 3 years. We'll see what happens after 3 years. But that is a potential way to find some means of investing for those people because of concerns over what will happen with Social Security. I just want you to keep that component in mind relative to, you could say, well, how's that fair to further generations before them? Social Security, every year it goes further for those born and those thereafter. Social Security and insolvency, unless Congress does some really, really good things to mimic what happened in '83 in terms of fixing the problem, is a big issue. We've already talked about standard deduction. The 20% small business deduction. Remember what a deduction does? Whatever your income is, set aside that 20%. That applies to this. We permanently extend that small business deduction. And that, think farms, ranches, not just small businesses, think farms, ranches. Health savings accounts was addressed in the one big beautiful bill. We'll talk about spending and eliminating waste in a minute. All right. Bonus depreciation. Let's say you have a ranch or farm and you buy a tractor. Always, some of you know this, you buy a tractor or you buy a brush hog, a piece of equipment, you had to depreciate that every year a certain amount. Each year you're allowed a certain amount. Now, you can fully depreciate the value of that. So right now it's really nice cattle prices, right? So cattle are bringing a whole lot of money. And this year, with what cattle are bringing right now, let's say you decide this is the right year, I need to upgrade some of my equipment, okay? You upgrade. Now, in the timing when cattle prices are high, which is some of you, like me, have been in the cattle business a lot of years, right? You know how quickly those good 2 years last. I'm shocked this last 3 or 4 years. We're headed, but now you can do bonus depreciation in the tax year that you need it, and that's going to be very helpful for the people that are running cattle right now for buying equipment. Same thing applies to any business right now, that bonus depreciation. When I was in my little dirt works business, if I still had that business and I wanted to buy a used semi truck right now, or a belly dump or a half round, I could immediately, because it's a true expense, I could deduct that off of my LLC income that year, and it saves a whole lot of money, and I get another piece of equipment, and I don't have to wait years in the future to bring depreciation into full effect. All right. The death tax. Anybody have a family member who's ever said to you, generations back or recently, how unfair it is to be taxed on death? So you paid all these taxes. My family knows. My family years ago dealt with this. Somebody died, losing the place, because the tax burden was so high back in the 70s for my mom's side of the family. And so Congress got here an earful over the years. This was temporarily addressed in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This is now permanent, correct, Jack? This is another permanent provision. It is now set out when you pass away, if you're an individual and you pass it on to your kids, you have $15 million that is not going to be in valuation of less than $15 million will not be subjected to that tax. So for smaller enterprises in the ranching farming community, that $15 million valuation allows you to pass that on to your children and your grandchildren. And it's doubled that if years ago they were jointly married, someone died, passed it to the spouse, and the spouse passed it on to the kids. That's where you end up with the $30 million. I should have told you this. Y'all know these handouts have most of this information, right?
Hey, are they ever going to get rid of that tax? I mean, that's one of the most unfair things.
Totally agree.
I mean,
you gotta have a way. So here we're gonna get in a minute. Any tax that you cut, right? Revenue, there's a revenue component. How you offset that revenue. So finding a way for the revenue to be able to do what we did in the one big beautiful bill. That's the real question. Where do you find the revenue replacement? So look. Can I tell you the quickest?
Taxes were supposed to be based on tariffs,
Right.
right? You know.
Well, originally.
Originally, yeah.
That's right.
And then I guess politicians got greedy.
Yep.
Started taxing.
Don't disagree with you at all.
I mean, when can we come to get back to the way the laws were actually
You know the
set
quickest
up?
way to address that issue
Okay.
is have the American population be willing to understand we've gone far beyond the original confinement of the 18 enumerated powers of what Congress was supposed to be doing. And all these programs, which you're going to have to, look, I was one of the, I'm not expecting you to know this, but among all the members of Congress, I held up the bill twice, overspending. I was one of 4 the first time, I was one of about 8, 10 the last time. I'm a fiscal hawk. The way we deal with that, you got to have more members of Congress willing to cut the amount of spending that we're spending. That's the solution. But that's the problem, is everybody wants to grow spending. Nobody wants to go back home and face the music and say, yeah, I cut, because that's not a role of Congress. Too many people can't withstand that. They've learned the art of running for office by promising more government. I was trained a different way. I wasn't trained that way.
Are we going to go back to the gold standard?
I'd love to, but when I get through the rest of this, let's hold questions.
Okay.
Let me get through the presentation. We'll try to, because this is going to take a while.
Yes.
And I want everybody to fully know that's the point of us doing this round of town halls. I got to get real information on what happened in Big Beautiful Bill. All right. Mandatory spending in 1965, Congress Congress only did not have control over 34%. Mandatory means it's going to happen. Okay? That represents Social Security. It was 34% of all spend back in 1965. Post-1965, other things started getting added to the mandatory column. So Congress used to, in the 12 appropriation bills, control 66% of all spending. Okay? Now look what's happened, where we're at today. 74% of all spending now is mandatory. Congress doesn't vote for it. It's on autopilot. It's trust fund managed. So think Medicare, think Social Security, think Medicaid, think SNAP, food stamps, certain veteran benefits. So the 12 appropriation bills that we vote on every year, that's all it includes. Is 1/4 the budget, because Congress has handed over everything else to the mandatory side of the column. So, what is the reconciliation bill? The one big beautiful bill is a reconciliation bill. The reconciliation bill was designed in the 1974 Budget Control Act. Look that up, make sure I'm accurate on that. It was designed to reconcile revenue compared to outlays, spend. Reconcile the gap. All right, let's do the next slide. We got a big problem. So, by law, the one big beautiful bill gives us the opportunity to go into that massive mandatory side that we've lost control over and make some adjustments. Huh? That was right? What did I say that was right? I'm forgetting now. Thank you. Okay. After you do 3 or 4 of these, things start running together. That's the mandatory column. So I want you to look, 6.8 trillion 2024. That is how much money was consumed by the mandatory side of the ledger, discretionary side of the ledger. But what do they each represent? 1.5 trillion was Social Security. 890 was net interest. You can't do anything about interest. We're going to pay interest, y'all. Anybody say, well, you got to pay it. 860 was Medicare. 830 was other mandatory. That's where SNAP was found. TANF, I think, would be in that column. Find out if TANF fits in the other mandatory. If Yeah, also find out supplemental security income, not SSI or SSDI, but supplemental security income. Find out if that's a part of the mandatory other. Medicaid. So those are all by the construct of the way the One Big Beautiful Bill is designed that we could actually address reconciling on the spend side. Discretionary spending in a reconciliation bill is you're prohibited from touching. What a reconciliation bill, the value is the likelihood of passing the reconciliation bill. Because in addition to being limited, it only can address mandatory, a reconciliation is one of those very unique products in Congress where it doesn't require the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. It's only 50% plus one vote. And that's why Democrats and Republicans, when they have the trifecta of control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, will use a reconciliation bill because it's simple majority. Okay? So it allows a simple majority vote, but you can only do mandatory things. Or you have to turn discretionary things into mandatory for a time period. Okay. I want you to see this side of the ledger. So this is the gap, the 6.8 trillion. This is how much we have no revenue for, the one that's almost 2 trillion. Then I want you to see the individual income taxes. That is the largest bucket of revenue we have. And so in a minute when we get talking about income taxes, it's very important that you realize of all the revenue that flows in, why individual income tax rates are very important relative to our ability to afford the things we do in this government. To the gentleman's pointed left, y'all, we used to be on only other tariffs. That's how we used to function in the governments up until 1913. Tariffs. All right, payroll taxes. 1935 Social Security was established. It was a 1% tax to the employee, a 1% tax to the employer, 2% total. That paid for the future for Social Security. In 1965, in tandem with when mandatory programming got to where it increased versus discretionary, Medicare was added. Supposed to be supported by the payroll tax, Medicare. I want you to look at this. Right now, we're bringing in $1.7 trillion in payroll tax. Now look at this column. How much is Social Security costing us every year? Do you see we don't have enough money from the payroll tax to also afford the other thing that was created? This is why we're headed towards insolvency on these two deals. Social Security is in much better shape than Medicare. Medicare, for generations, we've been pulling. I remember working for Dr. Coburn 20 years ago and him talking about the Medicare Trust Fund being exhausted because we were having to rely on the general fund. So the general fund is having to pick up the slack for where the payroll tax is not able to keep up. By the way, when it started out at 1% taxation, guess what the tax total is now? 7.65 to the employee, 7.65 to the employer, 15% sum total, and we're still not keeping up. It started at 1% to employee, 1% to employer. Corporate taxes. You're going to hear people say, what about corporations? 2017, the one permanency element of the 2017 tax cuts is they made this change from 35% corporate tax rate to 21%. That didn't affect the LLCs, so the small businesses. That's why we're taking the point to make sure we're taking the privilege to point out what we did on the LLCs and the small businesses. But in 2017, corporations were moved from 35% to 21%. At 35% in 2017, it was among the highest tax rates for a corporation of any country. Years it would be that we were second highest, or third highest, or fourth highest. You would say, well, what was the effect of what happened in 2017? In the 2017 bill, they made it permanent to move from 35% corporate rate to 21%. The result is, we went in 2017 bringing in $250 billion a year on the corporate tax rate at 35%, cut to 17%. 10 years later, we're bringing in twice that amount. You say, well, how is that possible? You cut the rate from 35 to 21, you've almost doubled what took 200 years as a country to get to 250 billion of annual collections in 2017. You've doubled it. What happened? Whatever you tax, you get less of. These corporations, multi-country corporations would say, why would I domicile here? I'll go somewhere else. As a result of that, they're paying taxes domiciled elsewhere. The moment the rate was cut to the average at 21%, the average of industrialized nations, guess what happens? America's a pretty good deal to locate, bring your business back to. That's an example of smart tax policy, a rate reduction, doubled 200 years to get 250 billion in revenue in 2017. Cut it, it doubled the amount of revenue we're getting in a few years. All right. This is the average, well, let's see on this page 8, that's the average revenue taken from you, the American taxpayer, over the last 65 years. 17%. This is the ebbs and flows when people said, yeah, you're taxing me too much, tax cut. Okay? Ebbs and flows. We were headed to, with the one big beautiful, absent the one big beautiful bill, to a 19%. Okay? One big beautiful bill adjusts that. We're going to stay now on the average. We'll be below the 19%. But here's the real problem. 27% is where we were headed on spend. Remember what I said about a reconciliation bill? It is to reconcile the difference between outlays and revenue. See this gap? Well, we're going to talk about, yes, we adjusted revenue, but yes, we adjusted spend. And I will contend, letting the one big beautiful bill not happen, tax increases still wasn't going to fix this problem. We had to fix the growing government programs that were exceeding the rate of inflation. So, that chasm, as Reagan said, the reason why we have deficits is not because we tax too little. The reason why we have deficits is because we spend too much. Josh, whose taxes got cut? Average percentage change in federal taxes under the one big beautiful bill. If you made between $15,000 and $50,000, you had 17% improvement in your tax liability. 17% improvement in your tax liability. Higher income brackets, when you get to $50,000 to $100,000 you made that year, you had 12% improvement in how much tax liability you have. Higher you get, it moves to 10 and 10, the highest brackets. So in terms of a percentage of what you pay, your tax liability, the greatest percentage benefit went to the lowest income. Okay? All right, Josh, that's percentage. What about real dollar value? Hold on. Because you've got to know what people are paying already. Here, talk about the top 1%. Okay, you can fact check this on Tax Foundation also. The top 1%, so here's the percentage of how much, what do these people, top 1% of earners all the way to the top 50% of earners, what do the top 1% of earners pay in income taxes right now? Right now, they pay 42% of all income taxes. The top 1% of earners pay 42% of all income tax. Remember the income tax bucket? How important it is? They pay 42%, top 1%. Sorry? Then I don't want to get in the back and forth. Just hang tight. We'll get into questions and answers. I challenge anybody who wants to validate or invalidate, go to Tax Foundation. They're probably the most exhaustive group used by state legislative bodies, by the federal government. Go look at what the Tax Foundation says. If you don't like my chart, go verify it with the Tax Foundation. But I can tell you, because I looked at the numbers and I looked at the facts, top 1% pay 42% of all income taxes. The top 25% of all earners pay almost 90%, 85 to 90% of all income taxes. Then when you get to the top 50% of earners, what's the average salary in Oklahoma? $36,000. Okay? So help me look at, again, these are the top earners. Top 50% of earners pay 97% of all income taxes. So let's do the 50%, what the livable wage in Oklahoma is. Let's say the average wage is $36,000. So if you make $37,000, you're in the top 50% of earners. And you're now associated with the top, also in doing the stats, everybody above $37,000 all the way at the top 1%. Don't forget, the top 1% pays 40% of it. The top 25% of earners pay almost 90%. So between the 85 to 90% to get to this little group paying 97%. They pay 97% of all income taxes, the top 50% of earners. So that 7% gain is when you move from the top 25% earners to the top 50% of earners. The say you're making $37,000 a year. Okay? You're in the top 50%. Okay? But let's say you make $35,000. What percentage do you think the top 30, the bottom, because this is the top 50% of earners. I wish we had a line for this. Let's say the bottom 50%. If the top 50% of all earners pay 97% of all taxes, income taxes, what does the bottom 50% pay? 2.3% actually. 2.3%. The bottom 50% pay 2.3% of all income taxes. All right. So top 1% pays 42% of all income taxes. Top 25% pay almost 90% of all income taxes. All right, Josh, let's break down the tax brackets. Who falls in those categories? If you make $11,900 or less, the tax rate as set by statute would say you owe a 10% taxation. All right, this is where we revisit the standard deduction, so the test. How much is the standard deduction now? $15,000. And this has been going on for a lot of years. You say, well, Josh, I thought there's something called the Earned Income Tax Credit where you hear CPAs talking about people that don't make anything. They end up getting like $6,000 checks, $7,000 checks, $10,000 checks. That doesn't make sense. They're paying 10%. What's the standard deduction? $15,000. So when this person makes $11,900, standard deduction used by 90% of all taxpayers, you're going to set the $15,000 aside. So what is their tax liability? Zero. They don't owe a dime in taxes. But then you have something called the Earned Income Tax Credit. All right, we've talked about what are deductions. We've now talked about what are tax credits, whatever your tax liability is. For every dollar you owe, you get a $1 tax credit. It lessens what you have to pay the government. But what's a refundable tax credit? Think wind, think solar, think Earned Income Tax Credit. A refundable tax credit is a unique nature of subsidization that says you don't have to owe the federal government a dime. We're just going to give you money when you utilize the tax structure to do it. It's called an Earned Income Tax Credit. No, it's not earned. It's not earned because you have no tax liability. But they're going to cut you if you're wind. If you're a windmill, they're going to cut you a check for how many kilowatt hours of wind production that you make. You didn't have to pay a dime. They cut you a dollar figure. If you're solar, that's why some of you picking up on why I was making a big deal in Washington, D.C. about refundable tax credits, okay? Standard deduction for this 11.9, you don't owe a dime, but that's how you get an Earned Income Tax Credit. You can also now be able to apply, and that's why some people who pay nothing, right? Standard deduction keeps them from paying anything. That's why they'll get checks back, massive checks back on the individual tax credit. Also, something else to note. If you're making $48,000 a year, guys, you're not paying at the 22% rate. The way that our federal tax structure is written is for the first $11,000 that you make, you pay a 10% valuation against that first $11,000. This was $11,000 or less. This is $11,000. Once you get to this threshold, between there and this threshold, you're paying 12%. So the next amount of money, you pay 12%. When you get to the $48,000, you can subtract the $11,900 from that you paid the 10% threshold in, and then whatever's left over is what you pay the 22% against. So when you see these numbers, it's not that you paid $197, you were taxed a full 32%. You get the first 11,000 is taxed at 10. The next 48,000 was taxed at 22. Y'all following that? It's complicated. Something only CPA knows. But this is when you look at these numbers, just know what's really going on there. Okay. More stats. We can probably just throw this slide away. We've not used it all morning, have we? Jack, do you think page 12, I know we put some time in that. If you tell me, Josh, there's something worthwhile in that, but we haven't used it all morning. All right. Rate of inflation. We're going to talk about the growth of government versus the growth of the economy. What you will find is as your economy year over year grows, right, average 2.5%, then what your hope is, if you've got a balanced budget, okay, let's pretend for a moment that we had a balanced budget. And every year our economy increased by 2.5%. What does that mean? Well, revenue, right? And let's say at the same time, once we were able to reach balance, we were able to afford, relative to to how much our economy grew, that much more government. That would help us keep balance, correct? But what happens if you've achieved balance and you grow government spending ahead of what your economy grows? That's been the history. We've been growing, when I first got to D.C., we've been growing government at about 4%, and the economy's only been growing about 2.5% year over year. And so that's what was happening with Medicaid. Remember, it's one of those programs, the mandatory side. Medicaid was growing like this, like a hockey stick. Okay? Post what we did with the One Big Beautiful Bill, Medicaid is still going to grow, but now at the rate of inflation. So when you hear people talking about there's a massive cut to Medicaid, I want you to be able to honestly respond to them and tell them we're still going to grow Medicaid year over year at the rate of inflation. But what we're not going to do is continue the 4% growth of government when the economy is growing much less than that. Okay? All right. The poverty rate. When we talk about Medicaid, so many people miss the one thing that we should stay fixated on. Julie is a physician. Like, I think you would be an expert. You probably should be teaching this right now. But relative to the healthcare environment and what we need to be paying attention to. Y'all, originally, Medicaid in 1965 was set up for the blind, the aged, the disabled, the pregnant, nursing mothers, the caretaker of the disabled, probably forgetting somebody in that, if you know something about this there, and the indigent, okay? So, this is the traditional population from 1965. What happened in 2014 is the able-bodied population, those that were not disabled or blind or pregnant or nursing mothers, they got added to the Medicaid rolls. What happened? This population explosion happened on the Medicaid rolls. What also happened is, when you see the times that the poverty rate has gone down, pretty important to note something. What we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill, the biggest change is the work requirements for Medicaid. It's the biggest change in terms of where the dollar value has changed. That plus the provider tax, what we can talk about later on, if we have time. What happened during this era when the poverty rate went down? Clinton-era work requirements. Look at the result in tandem with Clinton-era work requirements, what happened to the poverty rate. What happened here, President Trump is in office right here, and these numbers flatline of the population increase of Medicaid. Should our goal be to make sure we get more people on Medicaid, or should our goal be to reduce the poverty rate? What happened when the population stayed consistent and wasn't growing massively? What happened to the poverty rate? It went down. So what we did was the biggest change in the One Big Beautiful Bill, these work requirements, Clinton-era work requirements, is addressing the able-bodied, those that are not disabled, that fall in this category, this large place of growth. What you also need to know is the federal government on the traditional population, the disabled population, for years since 1965, would give, Julie knows this as a state lawmaker, federal government on average was getting 60% of the finances for that service. The state government picked up 40%. It's a rough average. Until you get to 2014. And then all of a sudden, the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare expansion, added the able-bodied population. And guess what the Obamacare statute said? It said, we're going to give you $9 for the able-bodied population for every $1 the state spends. So, if you're, I keep forgetting you're in office now, and I keep saying Julie only, sorry about that. So for the lawmakers, state lawmakers in the room, what you need to pay attention to is, for the states like California that have learned to milk the system, they have learned to prioritize the able-bodied population because the states only add $1 and they get $9. So what's happened is the traditional, the vulnerable, the blind, the aged, the disabled, the pregnant, the nursing mothers, they have stopped being the focus of the historic Medicaid purview among the states because the money was in the able-bodied population. And what we're going to find here in a few moments is how they're utilizing that to sign people up that I think you'll look at and go, I cannot believe they're doing that in California. We'll get there in a minute. Okay. Josh, we keep hearing all these stories about people that are going to be kicked off the Medicaid rolls. So when the CBO puts out these numbers, this is what I want you to know. When you hear the millions, you you've got the stats. Keep this paperwork. 1.4 million of those we're talking about are illegal aliens. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the chart of how California, the worst offender, does this. Hang with me. 4.8 million of these estimated are able-bodied adults. Y'all, this is what we're saying. Clinton era-like work requirements that we know prove to help in tandem with the poverty rate going down. Why? You get people back into a job. The best safe social safety net is a job for these able-bodied individuals. Because it will improve not only their lives, but the family members after them. And what we're saying is, according to the American Enterprise Institute, that there is at least 4 hours a day spent playing video games and watching TV for the able-bodied on Medicaid. What we're saying is, for that 4 hours that you'd be doing that, take that same 4 hours per day, do some community service. Or increase your skill. Go get an education. Or, let's say 4 hours, go get a job. And if you choose to do that, you don't lose Medicaid. But if you choose not to do that, then you lose Medicaid. And that's where there will be 4.8 million that they estimate that will choose not to do the 4-hour work requirement, or community service requirement, or the get a skill. That's what they're talking about when they tell you all these millions that are dropping off Medicaid. All right, what about another 1.3 million of them? During the Biden administration, there was a 2-year time period where the Biden administration did not do income eligibility verification. What did we talk about? The historic Medicaid? It is for those that were indigent, met poverty thresholds. But the Biden administration didn't find out for 2 years whether or not, once you met the criteria, whether or not you continued to meet the criteria. So what the One Big Beautiful Bill does is it says 6 months after you sign up, you got to prove that you're still making it. Now let's all be honest, because we didn't address this. How many of you know of somebody or heard stories about somebody that in addition to knowing their income was not fully reported, they were receiving cash payments so they could still be eligible? Everybody who's lived long enough has heard about these stories. Okay? We didn't address that. That's not even another component of people who hide the cash payments so they'll meet. What we're talking about is just for those who can't hide it, that they have to show that they meet those income thresholds. So just know what, when people are talking about all these millions, really know, get granular, you got the facts now. All right. All right, Billy, let's transition. This is where we speed drill. Okay? Don't worry, looking at the numbers, I'm not going through all these. That's more information for you to know on the numbers on Medicaid. Medicaid is still going to grow. Okay? That's the dollar value. Medicaid is still on the increase, but we're putting it back to the rate of inflation. For those, there were a few members of our conference who said, I can't go home and do this presentation. I don't feel like I'm for whatever reason, we want an additional fund because everybody keeps being fearful that it's going to do something. Even though we're going to grow Medicaid at the rate of inflation, they were concerned that they couldn't withstand what was going to happen there. And so they wanted an additional fund to go to hospitals and other Medicaid service providers. So in order to get those other members more comfortable, they created a $50 billion fund that's going to hospitals, nursing homes, and other government Medicaid service providers. So in addition to, Medicaid's still going to grow. There's $50 billion. $25 billion is going to be split equally among the states, and another $25 is need-based, if somebody can really prove need. So for all the sky is falling that you keep hearing, we're giving you facts. Page 17 if you want to read more about all that. Here's how California was scamming the Medicaid system. You can take the time to read through this and how they were using it for non-healthcare expenditures and flushing it into illegal immigrants. Just California alone, if we saw in the budget committee that if we could just turn California back to the 2021 expenditures, just 2020 expenditures, for where they begin to milk the 9-to-1 reimbursement rate, we could have almost solved our shortfall on the Medicaid front in one of those major areas that we had need for to make the math work. Just California alone. All right. This, Jack and I probably made him mad. We grilled over this and not purposely made you mad, but just how I can be anal attentive and, we were going to get this right for you. Okay? This chart, that's zero. Okay? CBO is telling everybody right now that we'll have a $3.4 trillion hole over a 10-year period. Now, I don't know that the CBO director is a Democrat, but there's a lot of people who believe that Phil Swagel is a Democrat. He reports directly to us on the budget committee. part of the design of the way that thing's set up. Is to direct. So there's a lot of people who have no problem saying, Phil, we think you're biased in the way that you see this thing. Maybe Phil's not. I don't know. I'm just letting you know the sentiment in D.C. is been pretty strongly they want to replace the CBO director. But nonetheless, his information right now has told the nation we're at $3.4 trillion. That we will have a debt load of $3.4 trillion over 10 years. You say, well, Josh, you got to have a scorekeeper. Why is his information wrong? Let me show you. 15 minutes. Okay. This blue area represents $2.6 trillion. That $2.6 trillion is the difference between how much he says we're going to grow year over year compared to what facts in the last recent years tell us we're going to grow. So look at this. We're going to come back to this one. This is what our growth of revenue year over year correlates to revenue. What we've done in the last several years. You need something? Yes. Okay. So 2.8% pre-COVID was what we were averaging year-over-year growth under Trump. Biden average is 2.7. 3.1% since World War II has been the average year-over-year growth rate. And the OBB projection, our budget committee started saying we think 2.6 is reasonable. Okay? CBO said 1.8. The difference between what they said of 1.8 and what we said in the budget committee is, just so happens the numbers are kind of similar, 2.6 trillion. They said 1.8, we said 2.6, and the difference of how much more revenue is 2.6 billion more in revenue will come in based upon the chart I just showed you. So that is the difference between what we believe they're scoring us way low on growth compared to what we believe. All right, now watch this. In addition to that, the blue represents tariffs. When the bill went over, and I held it up with Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, Andrew Clyde over the wind and solar stuff was my part of holding it up. I wanted to make sure the $500 billion on the changes to the wind and solar production tax credit was an accurate number. So that I can face you directly and say that is a truthful number that will happen. Okay? We sent it over from the House. We held it up. We negotiated. When we got done, we didn't have to have the tariffs to get to balance. The House version of the bill, based upon the negotiations that Chip, myself, Ralph, Norman, and Andrew Clyde, we hit balance, and we sent a balanced bill based on the numbers I showed you to the Senate. Something called the Byrd Rule. The Byrd Rule in the Senate snagged some things, and they made some changes on the wind and solar that I was not happy with. We worked really hard. They didn't throw out all of what we corrected on the wind and solar, but they threw out some of it. So then, the bill comes back to the House. That's why I was one of those that was holding the process up, because we're in negotiation with the White House. And what we're in negotiations about is how can we, if we're willing to not have absent tariffs be able to get to balance, because I wanted the full effect of tariffs to be there for cushion, because things can happen in your economy, right? Things can happen. And what we got from the White House was, because the president sees the same thing that we do on the Green New Scam, we got significant assurances from him of things he was going to do that could help us get... Yes, ma'am? Significant assurances from the president?
Green, what's green?
Green New Energy tax credits.
Okay.
Remember when we talked about refundable tax credits? I have a real issue with paying tax dollars to wind and solar
Yes.
on when they don't have any tax liability. Okay? And look, same thing can be said on carbon capture, which minimal, but some in the oil and gas industry. I've made it plain, but carbon capture is when you look at a graph, carbon capture is about that much, and wind and solar is 30 times that amount. So I was plain, I want rid of the carbon capture, I want rid of the wind and solar, because I believe in tax justice, not philanthropic taxation. It's been my personal tax philosophy for years. All right. But the worst offenders are the wind and solar on the liability tax credits, or refundable tax credits. So what I want you to see here is the tariffs for the next 3.5 years puts us to balance on the bill. And then the president, 3 days after signing the One Big Beautiful Bill, he started making adjustments, if you've been hearing about it, on the wind and solar. And I was absolutely in the room making sure, significant assurances from the White House, we were going to do everything we could to land a blow to the things that we worked on in the House to stop refundable tax credits. Okay. Everything else, after that, if we continue these tariffs, y'all, we have an additional 1.4 trillion. If we get past the 3.5-year window of Trump's presidency, and like Biden before, where he kept the tariffs, we'll actually end up with a net positive. And then one more little thing, this year, and I get back in a few weeks, part of the negotiations we had is plussing up defense spending in the mandatory side, so that when we got to this year's budget, that we could hold tight for this year's budget on the discretionary side, and what it would do would be add an additional $500 billion in savings. Okay, my team is flashing somehow 5-10 minutes. We had 15 minutes to spare when I got here, so I want some more time. I feel like we can do some more time. Can you give me another 5 minutes? Okay. Okay. So, this is border. I'm on Homeland Security Committee. I would love to set the time and talk to you about all the other things, the 700 more mile of physical barriers, what we blessed up in defense spending, all the other areas that we were able to address, but I don't have time. It's in your charts. 26, 27, 28 are the granular. I want to leave time for questions. So let's go to questions. Yes, ma'am. Now, let me say this before we start. We're going to make sure everybody gets about a minute and a half. That way speeches that would go on for 5 minutes don't happen, so we can get to as many questions as possible. Yes, ma'am. You got a minute and a half. You got a minute. In the House floor, I'm only giving a minute during the 1 minute time. So we're still giving you more than the House allows.
Most Americans do. Babies should be cherished, wanted, and treasured. Guns are the #1 killer of kids in the country. We need everybody who wants a gun should be able to have one, but it needs to be legally controlled. I support gun control. Regarding green energy, rather than using coal, oil, and gas, we do need, not the abuses that you pointed out, we don't need those, but we do need to support green energy, rooftop, solar, clean energy jobs, building efficiency upgrades, and EV charging. I support mail-in voting. In 2024, 30% of people voted mail-in. Seniors, disabled, rural voters, working families. It's very important that that not be infringed. And Citizens United. It's dark money. Everybody can become a corporation and donate as much as they want. Our government is being bought. Trump frequently exceeds his authority. He is taking advantage of you and everyone else to do what he personally wants. And he has a large revenge agenda too. You should have input on that, and you're not getting it. You personally. Tax churches that have multi-billion-dollar jets and take vacations in $10,000 square foot homes, it's not fair. These little old ladies are sending $50 out of their Social Security checks, and people like the prosperity gospel preachers make millions, billions, no taxes.
Okay, you went through a litany of things there. Let me go through. Let's talk about the tax subsidization on wind and solar. You're right, that's what I focused in on. I don't have any problem with wind and solar. I'm not against wind and solar. What I'm against is taking money from everyone in this room to prop up industries that on their own legs cannot stand. That's what I'm against. So, anybody who says I'm anti-wind and solar, no, I'm just I'm against corporate welfare. I think corporate welfare is tax injustice. Okay. All right.
Reproductive choice, very important.
Okay. Well, I disagree with you. I'm 100% pro-life. I believe that.
When have you ever been pregnant? When has any man ever been pregnant?
Let's go to something else. What was something else? I want to honor what you.
We want babies to be loved and cherished.
There was something else that you talked about. I want to.
not favor.
Yeah.
One murder on one baby.
Okay. Let's move on. Yes, ma'am.
I serve
Yes,
under
ma'am.
Secretary Vilsack and Secretary Perdue in the advisory committee for minority farms.
Oh, that's great.
Traveled across the United States and really blessed to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the Office of Public Partnership, Opportunity, Public Partnership Engagement.
Okay.
We served over 1 million people during COVID.
Yes,
Our
ma'am.
community-based organization did.
Okay.
And the things that we needed, we were in line to be able to get it to continue to serve this community. And when the administration took over, like I was getting a 96-foot hoop house, a 52-foot hoop house, because we're feeding our community.
Okay.
And that program was cut. And the information.
That was part of
listed-
Doge? Is that a part of the Doge
It
cuts?
was.
Okay, keep going.
It was. And we had, going into the USDA services, their hands are tied, so our hands are tied. Currently, I'm running for the county committee for a farm service agency.
Okay.
Because I feel it's important to empower, when we say small farmers,
Okay.
though it used to be 100 acres or less, or 200 acres or less, now farming small seems to be 1,000 acres or less.
Yeah.
And we're kind of being left out,
Right.
but we're the ones that people are lining up 3 miles back to get groceries every month. So we need
You
some
talking about
sort of
farmers
support.
markets? You talking about like
Well,
farmers?
I have a farmer's market. I have a physical brick and mortar farmer's market
Yeah.
that we built last year.
Right.
No, I'm talking about, we have a food pantry.
Oh.
We pastor a church, small church, less than 50. We don't get $1 million. Small church, right? People pay their tithes to keep their electricity on and so forth and so on. But what I'm saying, no, I don't have a break. Anyway, do you understand what I'm saying? Those types of things, I don't even know who to contact. All of the work shut down. All of the work shut down that we were
So
involved in.
so what I would tell you is, the field rep for this area, Tamara is right back here. So get with her, we'll be happy to get further educated.
Yes,
But I don't want you to be disappointed. I don't want to overpromise and
I
underdeliver.
understand.
I'm tight with your money.
Yeah.
So, like
We're
a lot of,
responsible with it. If you saw
So-
what we were doing with our own money
yes ma'am?
and not with the money of the government, you would be proud. Because citizens in this community, 6 different counties, are being fed and taken care of with what we are growing.
So I have a litmus test for my staff. Where do we find in the enumerated powers what Congress can be doing and what should be left to the states?
Okay.
You can show us constitutionality that Congress has the authority on this area, which I would look forward to getting educated, but that just, I don't want you to be,
I'm supposed to find the
no,
Constitution.
well, no. You just get the information. But what I don't want you to do is for me to try to act like I'm in favor of something. I
Yeah, I get it.
scrutinize things to say, do I have the permission according to the Constitution,
Right.
or is this something that should be left to the states? I use that as a litmus test. Sandy, yes, no?
Would you expand a little bit more on what federal government's going to be empowered
Yeah.
for versus what should be left to the state?
So the 18 enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, by the way, it's 3,000 words. Jack put you on homework assignments today. I think it's 3,000 words long. It may be 2,000 words. But regardless, it's the longest part of the Constitution. It delineates what Congress can do. And by the way, you know how many words are in the judiciary? 250. Balance, think about, the founders never intended the judiciary to be as big of a deal. In fact, you read the Federalist Papers, they said purposely it would be small. They never dreamed the judiciary, with the 250 words of the Constitution they applied to it, they never dreamed it would be so out of bounds. All right, executive's like 1,000 words. But for the bulk of the Constitution devoted to what does Congress have the authority to do, it enumerates 18 things. Among those, post office roads, piracy, patents, tax, I haven't done this in a long time, taxation, imports, tariffs, okay? 1/4 of its military, Army, Navy, militia. So, I'm missing a bunch there. But then the 10th Amendment says, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by the states, are reserved to the states or the people respectively. What that means is if it's not enumerated, then it's left to the states to find that to be the solution for that form of governance that someone may require, whether it be local governance or state governance. What we've done is, if I showed you in these charts, is with the expansion of all these programs, 1/4 of it is defense. We are pilfering the role of defense as to both the predominant thing the federal government was focused in on, and we've replaced it with so many other things that were used to be left in the states. All right, next question. Yes, sir.
Back to what I asked you earlier about the gold standard.
Yes, sir.
We need to be back on the gold standard. All right. Also, why do we rely so much on a non-government entity, the Federal Reserve, to set our interest rates? That shouldn't we allow this to continue? And is there any plans on getting rid of the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, look, I signed on to it, but I want to be more than honest with you guys. This thing over since, the meeting at Jekyll Island and all this happened and transpired, show me constitutionally, remember this was a big dispute between the founders about a centralized bank or not a centralized bank. Jefferson Adams, level dispute. And so I'm not going to pretend in this moment that I understand the intricacies of how we get ourselves out of this. Okay? But to Sandy's question, Lori, if you put her up to it, thank you. That was a good transition. But you can't find this in the enumerated powers, right? So it's not constitutional. But we have become so dependent upon it and upending the system and upending how do we do this? Look, there are things in 2.5 years of being in Congress I should know at this point. There are things I'm still growing and learning on. This is a place I've got to have to grow and learn on how to. Go for it.
Military, all right.
Do you ever want to educate me in this place? Like, Pitch, you can educate me. How do we transition?
What I'm saying is the military, we need, with the regular military, then you have the National Guard, which is a lot of people like, oh, they're not so, we deployed 4 times in Brecheen, especially Oklahoma. I deployed 4 times in combat, all right? Can we not get, I have 2 sons that are still in it. Can we not get more monies going to the National Guard, maybe like a reset program to get their equipment that they do have right now, brought back up to 1020 standards without having to wait for Congress or somebody to sit there, or someone from the Pentagon and say, oh yeah, well, Obama can have this amount of money, It's like they're not getting the monies. They'll turn in all the orders for parts, stuff like that. And, 'cause I still talk to the guys and stuff like that. Whether it's over weapons or, updates for NBC, whatever. Get these guys money. Allow that, if you guys, if they're having a problem with command, something like that, send somebody in to go in and talk to, the people and say, hey, let's get this stuff going. It's something real important to me. It's,
So Joseph Silk back here, he'll give you a card. Happy to learn more about this. Within DOD, there's certain areas where I have specialty in terms of the division of funds between, National Guard relative to the other armed service branches and how that determination is made. You'll have to educate us, and we'll have to get that information to someone within inside the Pentagon that can answer your question.
Josh,
I'm not on the armed services committee. Yeah.
I have a question. Our greatest president of all time, Donald Trump, said that he wants to get rid of the property tax. How do we do that when property tax is actually controlled by the county?
So, look, David Bullard, state senator for Oklahoma, has been working on an idea to do something relative to the ad valorem taxation. I've asked David. I'm interested. I'm on Julie's toes here. I need to probably let Julie talk to you this, what they're doing. But I know there's some activity there. I've asked David, because that's really a state. That's really a state issue. David, how would you replenish that? I'm very familiar with the states like Texas. I'm assuming Tennessee, Florida, others that have gone to a no-income tax. They've utilized the ad valorem tax to help get them there. I would, for Oklahoma, I'm speaking to you as a citizen, not because I can do anything about this, because on the federal level we can't. I would love to see Oklahoma transition to lessening the income tax, because I believe in the concept of whatever you tax, you get less of. I'd like to have more people want to come domicile and work and create a business in Oklahoma. And I think when you look at Texas, if Texas was a country, they'd be the 15th largest country in the world, because they become a mecca of relocation of businesses. And I think, why try to recreate the wheel? Look at the tax structure. Part of that is they have no income tax structure. Florida's growing. Tennessee, states that have done this have seen great financial success. So I think you look at templates, you try to, as my friend Thomas Massey, when I first got to D.C., he said something about, all these members who will come up with designs and their logos and, how to get information in your office. He's like, He's like, R&D, rip off and duplicate. R&D, okay? So I think we need to be duplicating what Texas is doing in trying to drive our income tax down. Now, I don't want David to hear this as if I'm torpedoing the concept of ad valorem. I'm interested in how do you do both?
Two more questions.
Two more questions. Mel, can I come back to you in just a second, just to make sure that I don't have anybody else that didn't get a chance to ask a question? Yes, sir?
I've got one thing I would like to see done in Congress, and that's to do a financial report when the member joins the Congress and when they exit the Congress. Because these people don't become multi-billionaires and billionaires on $174,000 a year. I would like to see financial audit on our congressional members.
So I have signed on to, so I don't operate in stocks. I'm in the ag industry and I'm just not that wealthy to be able to dabble in the stock market, okay? But I have signed on to the measure that would require a blind trust when you become a member of Congress. I did that with Matt Rosendale. I told my team if Matt went away, by the way, Matt's gone away, so he was in Jack's news, so I'm telling this, you know, I told probably, John, who had Jack's position? Matt. So Matt may have been the one I told this to, that when Matt left, I wanted to pick up that bill. I want to find out where Rosendale's bill is at. Because if nobody's taking it, I want it, I was a co-author on it. But it's to set up a blind trust so that members of Congress cannot have active involvement in increasing their stock portfolio relative to the knowledge of insider trading. So I don't have stocks, so you won't find that with me, but I agree with you.
We won't get honest government in Washington, which we don't have now. But we will not get honest government in Washington if we do not get term limits.
And for that, I practiced term limits when I was a state senator. I left committee when I first ran to do 8 years and leave. I committed that same number of years when I ran for Congress, 8 years, and then I would leave the House of Representatives. So if God wills that I've got the remainder of that 8 years left, I've got 5.5 years left, and somebody else will then become your member of Congress. Last question. If not, I got one taker. This lady back here. Ma'am, did you want to ask a question?
No, I want to compliment you on taking the time to come and see us this afternoon.
Oh, that's so sweet of you.
I'm telling you, going back to the boots on the ground, Tom Coburn days.
Oh!
I tell you again, Lee Buckington called my name out. We go back to what we have to do with our state representatives. Because for every cut that we say has to happen, matching has to come up with the state. When you do cut, how are we going to bridge that conversation, communication? Because it's boots on the ground today, but what we're going to be doing next quarterly, you know, this is just the beginning.
Yes, ma'am. Not only do you dress really cool, but you say cool things. That was
Well,
all right, we got time. If he tells me we don't, I'm going to tell him to stick it. John, can we do this, please? Can we?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Best question of the day. Here we go.
I really want to piggyback off of what you said. Being in agriculture, I have an agriculture in action farm training program. And one of our things is feet on the ground,
Yes.
hands in the dirt. Okay?
Yes.
I came here because it was you. Okay? And when I drove up and there was a person standing on the corner with a BLM sign stating that they're thugs. I mean, I may appear to be black, but I'm not just black. I'm native, and I'm not just native. I am Creole. You hear me?
Yes,
But more than that, I'm a child of God.
Hey!
And I expected a welcome sign for our community, if anything, but not that. So like when he said the best president and she laughed, some of your hearts, I probably skipped a few beats. Well, when I came up, that's immediately intimidating to me. I'm 65 years old and 4'11".
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you know,
What did the sign say?
I took a picture.
Is this somebody trying to make our
I
town
do
halls look like they're...
understand, but it
Yeah,
was
I
intimidating to me. BLM are racist thugs.
So just so y'all know, just so everybody knows, go to my social media page. In the 106 town halls we've done up to the start of the day, we've not had this level of organized trying to intimidate people in our town halls.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to be partisan. Please don't hear this. But Capitol Police reached out to us and said there's an organized effort, and it's the Oklahoma, they're identifying themselves as the Oklahoma Democrat Party in 2 different locations on social media, encouraging people to show up, get angry, and make noise. And they also told people that we were shutting down hospitals. So they're spreading information designed to get people to activate, to try to, so every town hall we've had thus far today, there's been somebody who's tried to agitate. That's why we had to spend extra time at the beginning trying to create civility. That's important. John, my chief of staff, who I love, even though he has played flag guy, I've got to get out of here to make our next town hall. We did take time and told me not to do, which means I got to get in the car and get to our next town. What time is the next town hall? Can we do that? Well, where's that? One of Barnesville. I know it's a long way. Yes, ma'am. All right.